And that will be the sign of the beginning of tremendous wars that will end only in the coming of the Mashiach.
Understand this before you continue the video.
Israel's back in the Promised Land. The Bible said they would return, and they did after nearly 1,900 years. That's never happened before in history. That the Middle East would be in crisis in the end times, and it is.
The Rebbe was an international rock star of a rabbi with influence leading to the White House. And he became a spiritual advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu. The Rebbe taught that the Jews could hasten the day of the Messiah, the Mashiach, the Anointed One, through obedience to God's will. And the Rebbe scorned the Jews for failing to prepare for the Mashiach, the Messiah, declaring the Jews resisted God's will. It was also the Rebbe who told Netanyahu that God had an important role for him. It was widely reported that in a private meeting, whilst Netanyahu was still unknown, the Rebbe told him that he would be Israel's last prime minister who will pass the scepter to the Messiah. And when the Rebbe met Netanyahu, he reminded him of his duty to do something to hasten the coming of Messiah. Since these meetings, Netanyahu has become the most important person in the Middle East, and his choices reverberate in the White House and in the halls of political power around the world.
Every time Bibi Netanyahu shows up in America and suggests that we need to go to war with a country, we instantly go to war with the country. Take a look at this compilation.
If you take away the Soviet Union and its chief proxy, the PLO, international terrorism would collapse. If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. Obviously, we'd like to see a regime change, at least I would, in Iran, just as I would like to see in Iraq. The question now is a practical question. What is the best place to proceed? It's not a question of whether Iraq's regime should be taken out, but when should it be taken out? It's not a question of whether you'd like to see a regime change in Iran, but how do it...
Are there any other nations that you would recommend that the United States launch preemptive attacks upon at this point?
The answer is categorically yes. The two nations that are vying, competing with each other, who will be the first to achieve nuclear weapons, is Iraq and Iran. But a third nation, by the way, is Libya as well. Libya is trying very rapidly to build an atomic bomb capability. So you have here now three nations.
All stand together to stop Iran's march of conquest, subjugation, and terror.
He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq, and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran. I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir.
I'll tell you what, this is stuff the American people have got to know. There is a document that was released, and it was drafted in the U.S. Embassy in Damascus, Syria, by the Chargé d'Affaires. We didn't have an ambassador at the time, so he was the top guy. And it details plans for overthrowing Syria. Now remember, there were no demonstrations. There was no uprising. People were prosperous. People were happy. People were ecstatic about President Assad and his wife. We draft plans. Now, 2 things in particular I'll point out. One was they said, look, we've got a problem because there's an enormous amount of foreign direct investment pouring into Syria. We've got to stop it. We've got to smear the reputation. Now, these are my words. It's not their words, but they say it in more, with a little more finesse. But the idea is smear the reputation and try to cut off this influx of funds. The other thing that they said, which is very sinister, is they said, look, there are opportunities we have where we can create religious divisions, and this can be used as a tool to create religious hatreds among people in Syria. This is coming out of the United States Embassy. I'll tell you what, this is stuff the American people have got to know. There is a document that was released, and it was drafted in the U.S. Embassy in Damascus, Syria, by the Chargé d'Affaires. We didn't have an ambassador at the time, so he was...
This is the Prime Minister of Israel in an interview in 1996.
I said that the West really doesn't understand militant Islam. So I wrote a book in 1995, and I said that if the West doesn't wake up to the suicidal nature of militant Islam, the next thing you'll see is the militant Islam is bringing down the World Trade Center.
That on the morning of 9/11, a lady looked out of her apartment in New Jersey, looking over to the burning tower, the first one, and saw 5 Middle Eastern looking men filming it, high-fiving and cheering. She took them to be Arabic. She called the police. The police eventually tracked them down. They were traveling around in a white van. They were Israelis. They became known as the Dancing Israelis. They were arrested and kept in custody for 71 days until the ultra-Zionist head of the criminal division of the Justice Department, Michael Chertoff, released them. And how many people know that the same Michael Chertoff released the 200 arrested in the spy ring? And they went back to Israel. These 5 dancing Israelis, 2 of which were known by the police to be Mossad agents, said that they were there to document the event. Well, hold on, how did you know it was going to happen?
You will find there an extraordinary information. There will be 2 big buildings in the land of Edom, which today we relate the word Edom to America. And those are the biggest, the tallest buildings in the world, and they will be brought down completely, and that will be the sign of the beginning of tremendous wars that will end only in the coming of the Mashiach. 1 week before, one of the great rabbis in Israel, a Hasidic rabbi, he came with some people, some of his disciples in the car, and they were coming towards the evening. He didn't want to lose the time of Mincha, the prayer of the afternoon. He said, please, can you stop right here? I want to daven, I want to pray Mincha here. They prayed Mincha with Minyan in front of everybody passing in Manhattan. Where? Right there, near the World Center. After he finished the davening, the prayer, he said, say bye-bye to those buildings because you are not going to see them no more. Say bye-bye to those buildings because you are not going to see them no more. You will find there an extraordinary information. There will be 2 big buildings in the land of Edom, which today we relate the word Edom to America. And those are the biggest, the tallest buildings in the world, And they will.
It's common knowledge Israeli Mossad and the CIA are behind the 9/11 terror attacks. Francesco Cossiga, President of Italy.
You remember it. It was a pretty stunning thing. You mean the purpose of the military is to start wars and change governments? It's not to sort of deter conflict? We're going to invade countries? And, my mind was spinning. This country was taken over by a group of people with a policy coup.